Your soulmate needs your help right now. God chose you for this moment. Something shifted before you even realized you were paying attention, a quiet internal nudge that didn't feel like urgency but responsibility, the kind that settles into your chest and doesn't leave. This isn't one of those moments that arrives with noise or panic. It arrives with weight. The kind of weight that says, pause for a second, stay right here, this matters more than you think. You didn't imagine this pull. Moments like this don't come from curiosity. They come from calling. There's a reason you're sensing heaviness without chaos, concern without fear. The person connected to you isn't breaking down outwardly. They're holding it together just enough that no one notices what's actually happening inside them. That's often when help is needed most, not when things explode, but when someone is quietly reaching their limit while still showing up for the world. Don't scroll past this feeling. It didn't come randomly. You may notice that this doesn't feel like romance, drama, or longing. It feels sober, grounded, serious, almost sacred. That's because this moment isn't about emotion, it's about assignment. There are times when connection exists not to fulfill you, but to position you. This is one of those times. God doesn't interrupt lives casually. When you're chosen for a moment, it's because you're capable of carrying it without being destroyed by it. The person tied to you right now isn't looking for solutions or speeches. They don't need saving. They need anchoring. There's a difference. Saving tries to change outcomes. Anchoring helps someone stay steady while they walk through what can't be rushed. You were placed in their life because you know how to be steady without controlling, present without overwhelming, strong without overpowering. That didn't happen by accident. Pay attention to how this moment feels in your body. There's likely no panic, just alertness. No confusion, just seriousness. That's discernment, not anxiety. Anxiety scatters. Discernment focuses. And right now, your focus is being drawn to someone who is quietly carrying more than they can process alone. They haven't told you what's happening because they don't fully understand it themselves yet. Sometimes people don't ask for help because they don't know how to name what they're going through. They just know something is cracking internally. When that happens, God often sends help in the form of presence, not answers. You weren't chosen to fix this. You were chosen to stand in it with them. This is why the timing feels specific. Not rushed, but exact. Like if you ignore it, something meaningful would be missed. Moments like this don't repeat easily. Not because they're dramatic, but because they're precise. Precision is a sign of divine timing. Random things feel noisy. Divine moments feel clear. You might wonder why you, especially if you don't feel particularly strong right now. That's exactly why. Strength that comes from ego tries to lead. Strength that comes from humility knows how to listen. You're not being asked to be perfect. You're being asked to be available. Availability is often the highest form of obedience. There's also something important to understand here. This isn't about dependency. The person connected to you isn't weak. They're overwhelmed at a soul level. When someone reaches that point, logic doesn't help. Advice doesn't help. What helps is being seen without judgment. Heard without interruption. Held without pressure. You know how to do that, even if you don't realize it consciously. Notice how this moment doesn't demand action yet. It demands awareness. Stay present. Stay gentle. Stay grounded. Don't rush to reach out with words that feel rehearsed or heavy. Sometimes the most powerful help begins with silence that feels safe. Silence that says, "I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." You were chosen because you don't panic when things get serious. You don't make everything about yourself. You don't disappear when emotions get uncomfortable. These traits were built in you over time, often through your own difficult seasons. Nothing you went through was wasted. It trained you for moments like this. There's also a spiritual layer unfolding that you don't need to fully understand yet. Just know this. When God aligns two people in moments of inner crisis, it's not always to bring them together romantically or permanently. Sometimes it's to ensure that neither collapses alone. Support doesn't always lead to union. Sometimes it leads to survival, growth, and realignment. The reason this feels heavy is because responsibility carries weight. But it's not a crushing weight. It's a steady one. Like holding a door open while someone walks through something difficult. You don't walk it for them. You just make sure they're not locked in. You might feel tempted to downplay this moment, to tell yourself you're overthinking. That's normal. But overthinking feels frantic. This feels calm and serious. There's a difference. Don't dismiss discernment just because it doesn't scream. You don't need to prepare a speech. You don't need to understand everything. You don't even need to know exactly what they're facing yet. What matters is that you remain open, emotionally available, and grounded. God doesn't choose people who have all the answers. He chooses people who can be trusted with presence. There's a reason you crossed their mind recently, or they crossed yours. That wasn't nostalgia. That was alignment. Thoughts don't just float into awareness for no reason. Especially not the kind that feel weighted with concern rather than emotion. This moment may test your patience, not because it's dramatic, but because it's subtle. Subtle moments require restraint. Restraint not to force connection. Not to demand clarity. Not to rush healing. Healing that's rushed breaks. Healing that's supported strengthens. You may feel unsure about what role you're supposed to play. That's okay. Roles become clear through presence, not planning. Show up with humility. Show up without expectations. Let the moment reveal itself instead of trying to define it. There's also something sacred about being chosen to help rather than to receive. Receiving feels good. Helping feels meaningful. Meaning lasts longer than pleasure. This moment isn't about how it makes you feel. It's about what it allows someone else to survive with dignity. Don't underestimate the power of simply being steady. People don't remember who gave them advice during hard times. They remember who didn't leave. Who didn't judge. Who didn't rush them. Who made space for their process. If you're wondering whether this will change your life, the answer is yes, but not in the way you expect. Moments like this change you quietly. They deepen your character. They refine your compassion. They align you more closely with purpose rather than desire. You're not being asked to sacrifice yourself. You're being asked to be present. Presence doesn't drain when it's grounded. It drains when it's forced. Stay grounded. Stay honest. Stay open. This isn't about being the hero. It's about being the witness. Being the calm in someone else's storm. Being the reminder that they are not abandoned, even if they feel lost right now. God chose you for this moment not because you're flawless, but because you're faithful in small, quiet ways. Faithfulness isn't loud. It shows up. And right now, showing up matters more than anything else. Stay right here. Let this moment breathe. What you're being asked to do next will become clear, not through pressure, but through peace. And when you look back on this moment later, you won't remember what you said. You'll remember that you were there. And that was enough. It didn't start with a thought this time, it started with a responsibility settling into you the way evening settles into a room, slowly, deliberately, without asking whether you're ready for it or not. There was no emotional rush, no spike of fear, just a steady awareness that something important is unfolding and you are already part of it. Not by accident. Not by convenience. By design. Moments like this don't ask for enthusiasm. They ask for steadiness. As the hours passed, you may have noticed how your attention kept returning to the same quiet concern, even while you tried to focus on other things. Not obsession, not worry, but awareness. Awareness doesn't shout. It waits. It stays present even when you try to move away from it. That's how you know this isn't imagination. Imagined worries escalate. Real callings remain calm. The person connected to you right now is standing at a point where strength has been overused. Not broken, not defeated, just tired in a way that doesn't show on the surface. They're still functioning, still responding, still doing what needs to be done, but internally something is fraying. Not enough to collapse, but enough to need support that doesn't demand explanation. This is where your role becomes important. Not as a fixer. Not as a guide. But as a stabilizer. There's a difference between helping someone move forward and helping someone stay upright. Right now, staying upright is the victory. And you understand that instinctively, even if you haven't put words to it yet. Notice how this moment doesn't come with instructions. No clear script. No checklist. That's intentional. If you were given a plan, you'd rely on the plan instead of presence. Presence can't be outsourced. It has to be embodied. You don't need to know what to say because words are secondary here. Tone matters more. Energy matters more. Consistency matters more. You may feel a temptation to reach out impulsively, to fill the silence with reassurance or questions. Pause before you do. Not because reaching out is wrong, but because timing matters. Support offered too quickly can feel invasive. Support offered with patience feels safe. Safety is what's needed here, not urgency. There's something sacred about being trusted with someone's unseen struggle. It means you've demonstrated, over time, that you don't make other people's vulnerability about yourself. That you don't turn seriousness into drama. That you can hold space without needing to be the center of it. These qualities aren't glamorous. They're essential. You weren't chosen because you have perfect faith or unshakable confidence. You were chosen because you know how to remain steady when things feel unresolved. You don't need everything to make sense before you show up. You don't disappear just because answers aren't immediate. That kind of endurance is rare. As you sit with this moment, you may realize that your own past prepared you for this. Not the highlights, but the quiet seasons where you had to hold yourself together without being fully seen. You learned how to breathe through uncertainty. How to function without clarity. How to keep your heart open without having control. Those lessons weren't random. They shaped you into someone who can now be trusted with someone else's weight, without being crushed by it. There's also a spiritual maturity being asked of you now. Not the kind that speaks loudly about belief, but the kind that practices restraint. Restraint from assuming you know what's best. Restraint from projecting outcomes. Restraint from making promises you can't keep. This moment doesn't require big declarations. It requires reliability. The person tied to you doesn't need you to solve their situation. They need you to be someone who doesn't disappear when the situation doesn't resolve quickly. There's comfort in knowing someone is still there when nothing has changed yet. That kind of comfort is rare, and it heals more than words ever could. You might notice that this role feels heavier than emotional support usually does. That's because this isn't about comfort alone. It's about witness. Being a witness means you stay present even when there's nothing to say, nothing to do, nothing to fix. You acknowledge that something real is happening without rushing it toward resolution. Don't underestimate how powerful that is. Most people rush away from discomfort, even when it's someone else's. You don't. That's why you were chosen. Not because you're immune to discomfort, but because you don't abandon people in it. This phase may test your patience. Not because the other person is difficult, but because silence can feel unproductive. Resist the urge to make something happen just to relieve the tension. Tension held gently becomes strength. Tension rushed becomes fracture. There's also an invitation here for you to trust God in a deeper way. Not by expecting a miracle outcome, but by trusting that obedience sometimes looks like waiting without clarity. Waiting without reassurance. Waiting without visible progress. Faith that only works when things improve isn't faith. Faith that remains steady when nothing changes is what's being asked of you now. You may feel moments of doubt. Wondering if you're misreading this. Wondering if you're doing enough. That's normal. Doubt doesn't disqualify you. It keeps you humble. Humility is essential in moments like this. It prevents you from turning help into control. Pay attention to how you speak during this time. Not just to them, but to yourself. Avoid narratives that make this moment bigger or smaller than it is. It's significant, but it doesn't need to consume you. Balance is part of the assignment. You're meant to support without losing yourself. There's also a boundary here that's important. Being present doesn't mean absorbing everything. You're not meant to carry their pain for them. You're meant to sit beside it. Sitting beside pain is sustainable. Carrying it isn't. God doesn't ask you to be a substitute for healing. He asks you to be a companion during it. You may notice that this moment is refining your character quietly. Teaching you patience without reward. Compassion without applause. Strength without recognition. These qualities don't feel exciting in the moment, but they build something lasting in you. This connection right now isn't about outcome. It's about obedience to a moment. Moments like this often don't reveal their purpose until long after they pass. Don't rush to understand why this matters. Focus on being faithful within it. If you're wondering whether this will change the nature of your relationship, the answer is yes, but not necessarily in visible ways. Shared seriousness deepens bonds differently than shared joy. It builds trust, not excitement. Trust lasts longer. You don't need to announce your support. You don't need to make promises. You don't need to say the perfect thing. What matters is that when they look up, emotionally, they sense someone steady nearby. Someone who didn't leave when things got heavy. This moment may pass quietly. No dramatic turning point. No obvious resolution. And that's okay. Some of the most important moments in life don't announce themselves as important. They reveal their significance only in hindsight. Stay attentive. Stay gentle. Stay grounded. Let your presence speak before your words do. Let your consistency do what explanations cannot. God didn't choose you because you're the loudest or the strongest. He chose you because you're trustworthy in quiet moments. Because you can hold seriousness without turning it into fear. This is not a moment to rush through. It's a moment to stand in. And as you do, trust that what you're offering right now, steady presence, patient support, grounded compassion, is exactly what was needed. Nothing more. Nothing less. Just you, showing up, exactly as you are, in the moment you were chosen for. It didn't feel urgent in the way emergencies do, it felt deliberate, like a moment that had been waiting quietly for you to notice it before fully stepping forward. There was no panic in it, no rush to act, just a steady pull that said, this is still happening, and you're still needed. That kind of pull doesn't come from emotion. It comes from purpose. Purpose doesn't shout. It stays. As time passed, you may have noticed that this sense of responsibility didn't fade the way fleeting concerns do. It stayed consistent, calm, and clear. You weren't losing sleep over it, but you also couldn't dismiss it. That balance matters. When something is from fear, it drains you. When something is from calling, it steadies you even as it asks more of you. The person connected to this moment is not in crisis in the obvious sense. They're not falling apart publicly. They're not asking for help loudly. They're carrying something privately, something that has been accumulating over time. Not one big event, but many small pressures layered quietly on top of each other. That kind of weight doesn't break someone suddenly. It wears them down slowly. This is why your role remains subtle. You're not being positioned as a rescuer. You're being positioned as a stabilizing presence. Someone who doesn't intensify the situation, doesn't dramatize it, doesn't rush to interpret it. Someone who can sit in seriousness without needing to resolve it immediately. That ability is rare, and it's why you're here. Notice how this moment doesn't ask you to do more, it asks you to do less. Less explaining. Less fixing. Less projecting. More listening. More observing. More patience. Most people equate help with action. But there are seasons where help looks like restraint. Like knowing when not to speak. Like allowing silence to exist without trying to fill it. You might feel an internal tension between wanting to be useful and knowing that usefulness here doesn't look like productivity. That tension is part of the refinement happening in you. You're being taught that presence is not passive. Presence is active containment. It holds space without collapsing into it. There's also a reason this role feels weighty but not overwhelming. God doesn't assign moments that require more than you can carry. He assigns moments that require exactly what you already have, even if you haven't named it yet. You have emotional steadiness. You have restraint. You have the ability to stay when things don't resolve quickly. Those qualities matter more here than insight or advice. The person you're connected to doesn't need clarity right now. They need permission to exist in uncertainty without feeling abandoned. Uncertainty feels unbearable when someone feels alone in it. It becomes manageable when someone else can sit nearby without judgment or pressure. That's what you offer, even without saying a word. You may notice that your own emotions remain surprisingly regulated during this time. You're not spiraling. You're not consumed. That's not detachment. That's alignment. Alignment allows you to support without absorbing. Absorbing would drain you. Supporting steadies both of you. This phase may feel uneventful on the surface. No dramatic conversations. No big confessions. No turning points. But internally, something important is happening. Trust is being reinforced. Safety is being established. When someone knows another person won't disappear when things are heavy, it changes how they process everything else. Be mindful of the urge to check in too often or to pull reassurance out of the other person. Support that demands feedback becomes pressure. Support that remains steady without requiring validation becomes safety. Safety is what allows people to open when they're ready. There's also something humbling about being chosen for a moment that may never be publicly acknowledged. No one may ever say, "Thank you for being there." No one may ever recognize what you carried quietly. But God sees faithfulness that doesn't ask to be seen. That kind of faithfulness shapes character deeply. This season may challenge your patience more than your strength. Patience without timeline. Patience without explanation. Patience without visible progress. That kind of patience refines trust at a deep level. It teaches you to remain anchored even when outcomes aren't visible yet. You might question whether your presence is actually making a difference. That doubt is normal. But understand this clearly. Stability doesn't announce its impact. You don't see it working while it's working. You see it later, in how someone didn't break when they could have. Pay attention to your own boundaries during this time. Being present doesn't mean being constantly available. It means being consistently grounded. You're allowed to rest. You're allowed to step back when needed. Burnout helps no one. God doesn't ask you to sacrifice your well-being to prove devotion. There is also a lesson here for you, not just for the other person. You're learning how to hold seriousness without turning it into anxiety. How to care deeply without controlling outcomes. How to trust timing instead of trying to accelerate it. These lessons will serve you far beyond this moment. The connection right now is being defined by depth rather than excitement. Depth isn't loud. It's solid. It doesn't fluctuate with mood. It stays. That kind of connection doesn't always turn into what people expect, but it always leaves both people stronger than before. You may feel moments where you want reassurance that you're doing this right. That urge is understandable. But doing this right isn't about perfection. It's about sincerity. Are you present? Are you patient? Are you grounded? If yes, you're already doing what's required. This is not the time to demand clarity or to force conversations. Clarity arrives when the internal pressure eases, not when it's challenged. Forcing clarity too early can shut someone down. Allowing it to surface naturally builds trust. You were not placed here to change someone's path. You were placed here to walk beside them for a stretch of it. Walking beside doesn't mean leading. It means matching pace. Matching pace is an act of respect. There may be moments when silence stretches longer than you're comfortable with. Resist the urge to interpret silence as failure. Silence can be protective. Silence can be healing. Silence can be the space where someone finally gathers themselves. Remember this, your steadiness matters even when nothing appears to be happening. Especially then. Most people can show up when things are dramatic. Few can remain when things are quiet and unresolved. You are one of the few. This moment is not asking you to fix, rescue, or decide. It's asking you to remain available without expectation. That kind of availability is rare, and it's powerful. God doesn't choose people for moments like this based on how loudly they believe, but on how quietly they obey. Obedience here looks like patience. Like humility. Like presence without control. This phase will not last forever. It will shift when it's meant to. And when it does, you may not even realize what you helped prevent, what you helped stabilize, what you helped carry. But one day, you'll look back and understand that being there, calmly, consistently, without pressure, was the point. Not the outcome. Not the recognition. The presence. That's what you were chosen for. And that's more than enough. It became clear in a way that didn't start in your thoughts, but in your restraint, in the way you didn't feel the need to rush forward or pull away anymore. You noticed yourself slowing down internally, choosing steadiness over reaction, and that's when you understood this moment was still unfolding and you were still part of it. Not loudly. Not visibly. But meaningfully. Moments chosen by God often look quiet on the outside and demanding on the inside. As time continued, you may have felt an unusual balance within yourself. Concern without panic. Care without attachment. Responsibility without pressure. That balance isn't accidental. It's the kind that forms when you're meant to hold space, not take control. Holding space is one of the most difficult things to do emotionally, because it requires strength without dominance and compassion without intrusion. The person connected to you right now is navigating something layered, not a single issue, but a buildup of internal weight that has nowhere obvious to go. They're functioning, responding, showing up, but underneath that surface there's fatigue that hasn't been voiced. When someone carries weight like this, they don't need someone to lighten it artificially. They need someone who doesn't add to it. That's why your presence matters more than your words. You may notice that nothing in you feels compelled to give advice or offer solutions. That instinct is correct. Solutions would land as pressure right now. What's needed is permission to be human without explanation. You offer that simply by staying steady. You might feel moments where doing nothing feels irresponsible. Resist that thought. There's a difference between inactivity and restraint. Inactivity disengages. Restraint stays alert without interfering. You are not absent in this moment. You are attentive in a way that doesn't overwhelm. This role asks you to trust that not every meaningful contribution is visible. Some of the most important support happens beneath the surface, where there's no immediate feedback. Faithfulness in hidden moments shapes outcomes you may never witness directly. You may also notice that your own emotions remain surprisingly calm, even as you sense the seriousness of the situation. That calm is not detachment. It's grounding. Grounded people can sit near emotional weight without being pulled under by it. That ability is not common. It's cultivated through lived experience. Your past seasons prepared you for this in ways you probably didn't recognize at the time. The times you had to hold yourself together quietly. The moments you learned patience because there was no other option. Those experiences trained you to remain present without demanding resolution. That's exactly what's needed now. There's also a lesson unfolding for you about trust. Trusting that God's timing doesn't need your acceleration. Trusting that presence doesn't require performance. Trusting that obedience sometimes looks like waiting with intention instead of acting with urgency. You might feel the urge to clarify where you stand or what this means. Let that urge pass. Meaning will reveal itself when the moment has done its work. For now, clarity would only create pressure where patience is required. Be mindful not to overextend yourself emotionally. Being chosen does not mean being consumed. You are meant to remain whole while offering support. Wholeness allows consistency. Exhaustion helps no one. God never asks for self-destruction in the name of faithfulness. There may be moments where you feel unseen in this role. Where no acknowledgement comes. Where nothing seems to change. This is where humility deepens. Doing something important without being recognized strengthens character in ways recognition never could. The connection right now is not defined by closeness or distance, but by reliability. Reliability says, I am here whether things feel light or heavy. That kind of reliability builds safety. Safety allows healing to happen naturally instead of being forced. You may notice that silence plays a large role in this phase. Silence doesn't mean absence. It means containment. Silence allows emotions to settle without being shaped by outside influence. Your comfort with silence is one of the reasons you were chosen. There's also a subtle boundary being formed within you. You're learning how to care deeply without crossing into responsibility that isn't yours. That boundary protects both of you. Support without boundaries becomes control. Support with boundaries becomes sustainable. You might question whether this connection will change after this moment passes. It will, but not in a way that needs to be predicted now. Shared seriousness leaves a mark that doesn't fade easily. Even if paths diverge later, this season will remain significant. Understand this clearly, you are not meant to rescue, convince, or decide. You are meant to accompany. Accompaniment is powerful because it honors the other person's agency while offering strength nearby. There may be moments when the weight you sense feels heavier than expected. When that happens, ground yourself. Breathe. Step back if needed. God does not expect you to carry what isn't yours. You are a support, not a substitute for healing. This season refines your ability to be steady under emotional ambiguity. That skill will serve you in many areas of life, far beyond this connection. Ambiguity doesn't weaken you anymore. It strengthens discernment. You may notice that your own priorities feel clearer now. When you're placed in moments of seriousness, trivial concerns fall away naturally. That clarity is a gift. Don't ignore it. There is nothing dramatic about what you're doing right now, and that's exactly why it matters. Dramatic support often fades quickly. Quiet consistency lasts. You don't need to announce your availability. You don't need to make promises. You don't need to say the perfect thing. What matters is that when the other person senses your presence, it feels calm, not demanding. God often works through people who know how to stay when others would leave, who know how to listen when others would speak, who know how to wait when others would rush. That's why you were chosen. This moment will not last forever. It will shift when it's meant to. And when it does, you may realize that your role was never about fixing anything. It was about preventing collapse, about providing steadiness when steadiness was scarce. One day, you may look back and understand how much strength it took to simply remain present without interfering. You may realize that what you offered wasn't small at all. Until then, continue as you are. Grounded. Patient. Available without pressure. You don't need to see the outcome to know your presence matters. God chose you for this moment not because you are loud in faith, but because you are consistent in character. And right now, consistency is exactly what is needed. It revealed itself through a deeper sense of responsibility that didn't feel heavy, just unavoidable, like knowing you need to stand still because something important is passing through. You weren't restless. You weren't anxious. You simply knew this moment hadn't finished unfolding yet, and neither had your role within it. That kind of knowing doesn't come from emotion. It comes from alignment. As the days move forward, you may notice that your presence feels different now. Not louder, not more intense, but more grounded. You're not scanning for signs or waiting for something dramatic to happen. You're simply available in a way that feels steady and real. That availability isn't passive. It's intentional. It's the kind that says, I'm here without asking you to perform, explain, or resolve anything. The person connected to this season is still carrying something internally that hasn't found language yet. Not because they're hiding it, but because it hasn't fully formed. Some struggles exist before words can shape them. When that happens, advice feels intrusive and questions feel overwhelming. What helps is consistency. Familiar calm. A sense that someone nearby isn't going anywhere just because things feel undefined. This is why you may feel guided to slow down rather than lean in. To listen more than speak. To notice more than respond. Most people confuse help with action. But this moment isn't asking for action. It's asking for regulation. Emotional regulation is contagious. A steady nervous system can calm another without a single word exchanged. You may feel moments of internal tension, not because something is wrong, but because your instinct to support wants direction. Let that tension teach you restraint. Restraint is not withholding. It's choosing not to interfere with a process that needs space to breathe. Interference often delays healing. Space allows it. There's a reason this feels sacred rather than emotional. Sacred moments carry weight without chaos. They don't demand attention. They demand respect. Respect looks like patience. Like humility. Like trusting that God's work doesn't need your urgency to be effective. You might notice that nothing about this season flatters your ego. There's no recognition. No reassurance that you're doing it right. No emotional reward attached. That's intentional. If reward were present, motivation would shift. This moment is refining you to serve without needing affirmation. Pay attention to how your own inner life is being shaped through this. You're learning how to care without clinging. How to remain present without absorbing. How to be dependable without becoming responsible for outcomes. These distinctions matter. They're the difference between support and self-erasure. There may be moments where you question whether your presence is actually needed. That doubt doesn't disqualify you. It protects you from pride. Pride tries to measure impact. Faithfulness trusts impact without measuring it. The connection right now is being built on seriousness rather than emotion. Seriousness doesn't fluctuate. It holds. It doesn't require constant reinforcement. It simply remains. That kind of connection may not feel exciting, but it's durable. You may sense that timing matters here, not in the sense of urgency, but precision. Acting too early could overwhelm. Acting too late could feel like absence. Precision requires attentiveness. Stay observant. Stay gentle. Don't assume silence means disengagement. Silence often means processing. You're not being asked to extract information or push for clarity. Clarity will come when internal pressure eases. Your job is not to accelerate that easing. It's to not add weight to it. There's also a boundary you're learning to honor, perhaps without realizing it. Being present does not mean being constantly accessible. You're allowed to step back when you need to ground yourself. Sustainable support requires self-awareness. God does not ask you to burn out to prove obedience. You may notice that your own priorities feel quieter now. Less scattered. Less reactive. When you're placed in moments that matter, trivial concerns fall away naturally. That's not loss. That's focus. This season may feel long because it doesn't have milestones. No checkpoints. No clear progress markers. That's intentional. Growth that happens without measurement often lasts longer. You don't need to see movement to know something is happening. Be mindful not to interpret heaviness as failure. Heaviness often means something important is being held, not mishandled. You're not carrying this alone. God does not delegate responsibility without sustaining presence. There's a humility forming in you that doesn't come from insecurity, but from understanding. Understanding that you're part of something bigger than your perspective. That you don't need to know the full picture to be faithful within your frame. The person connected to this moment may never fully articulate what your presence meant during this time. That doesn't reduce its value. Some of the most important support we receive is felt, not remembered consciously. It shapes us quietly. You may feel moments where you want closure or reassurance that this season will end cleanly. It will, but not on a timeline you control. Clean endings come from patience, not pressure. This role you're in right now is teaching you how to trust God's pace instead of your own sense of urgency. Urgency often comes from fear of missing something. Trust allows you to stay present without grasping. You might also notice that your capacity for compassion has deepened. Not emotional compassion that spills over, but grounded compassion that holds. That kind of compassion doesn't exhaust you. It steadies you. Nothing about what you're doing right now will look impressive to others. It's not meant to. It's meant to be effective. Effectiveness doesn't always come with visibility. There's a quiet courage in staying when there's nothing to do. In remaining kind when there's nothing to say. In holding space when outcomes are uncertain. That courage is being built in you now. You may feel moments where you wonder if you're being too passive. You're not. You're being precise. Precision often looks like restraint to those who equate movement with progress. This season will shift eventually. Not abruptly. Not dramatically. It will shift because something internally will resolve enough to allow motion. Until then, stillness is not stagnation. It's containment. God chose you for this moment because you can hold seriousness without turning it into fear. Because you can remain available without demanding answers. Because you understand that presence is sometimes the most powerful form of help. You're not here to change someone's direction. You're here to keep them steady while direction becomes clear. That distinction protects both of you. There may come a time when you realize just how much strength it took to simply remain calm, patient, and grounded through this. You may realize that this season refined you in ways comfort never could. For now, don't rush the end. Don't rush the understanding. Don't rush yourself. Continue as you are. Observant. Steady. Humble. What you're offering is not dramatic, but it is rare. And rare things matter more than loud ones. This moment doesn't need to be fixed. It needs to be honored. And you're doing that, quietly, exactly as you were chosen to do. It arrived as a calm awareness that didn't shake you, but positioned you, like realizing you're meant to stand guard for a while without being told how long the night will last. There was no emotional surge, no dramatic signal, just a grounded understanding that your steadiness still matters here. This moment hasn't passed yet, and neither has your role in it. When God asks someone to remain, He doesn't do it loudly. He does it clearly. You may notice that you're no longer questioning why this feels important. The question has shifted into acceptance. Acceptance doesn't mean resignation. It means you've stopped resisting the responsibility of presence. You're not trying to interpret every feeling anymore. You're simply available, alert, and emotionally upright. That posture is not passive. It's disciplined. The person connected to this season is still moving through something that hasn't settled into certainty. Not chaos, not crisis, but transition. Transitions are often heavier than breakdowns because there's no clear release point. They require endurance, not intervention. And endurance is exactly what your presence offers. This is why nothing in you feels rushed. You're not panicking. You're not strategizing. You're not trying to accelerate an outcome. You're allowing time to do what time does best when it's not interfered with. God's work often unfolds in layers, not leaps. You're being asked to respect the layering. You may feel moments where silence stretches longer than you're comfortable with. Let it. Silence here is not distance. It's processing. It's the space where someone gathers strength without having to explain themselves. By not filling that space, you're protecting it. There's a quiet maturity being built in you through this. You're learning that showing up doesn't always mean engaging. Sometimes it means staying emotionally accessible without initiating movement. That balance is difficult. Most people either withdraw or overstep. You're doing neither. Notice how your own emotional state remains regulated. You're not absorbing their uncertainty. You're not mirroring their internal weight. You're holding your ground. That's not emotional detachment. That's emotional leadership. Leadership doesn't pull others forward prematurely. It creates safety for them to move when ready. This season may challenge your sense of usefulness. You might wonder if you should be doing more. That urge is understandable, but it's not always accurate. Effectiveness is not measured by activity. Sometimes it's measured by stability. Right now, stability is the assignment. You weren't chosen because you're endlessly available or emotionally flexible. You were chosen because you know how to remain intact while being present. That skill protects both of you. Support that costs you your center eventually collapses. Support that comes from grounding sustains. Be careful not to confuse patience with inactivity. You are actively holding space. You're actively remaining regulated. You're actively choosing not to pressure, not to demand, not to interpret prematurely. That restraint is work, even if it doesn't look like it from the outside. There's also a refinement happening in how you trust God. This isn't trust that waits for signs or outcomes. It's trust that remains steady without updates. Trust that doesn't need reassurance to stay committed. That kind of trust deepens quietly and lasts longer. You may notice that your own life feels simpler during this time. Less noise. Less distraction. Less emotional clutter. When you're placed in moments that require seriousness, superficial concerns naturally fall away. That simplification isn't loss. It's focus. The connection right now is not being tested. It's being proven. Proven through consistency. Through your ability to remain without being reassured. Through your ability to care without controlling. Through your ability to stay grounded when nothing obvious is happening. There may be moments when you feel invisible in this role. When your presence goes unacknowledged. That invisibility can sting if you expect recognition. But this moment was never about recognition. It was about faithfulness. Faithfulness often happens where no one applauds. You're also learning something important about boundaries. Being chosen does not mean being consumed. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to step back when needed. God does not ask for emotional depletion. He asks for consistency over time. If you feel tired, pause. Ground yourself. This is not a sprint. It's a watch. Watches require alertness, not exhaustion. Pace yourself. Sustainable presence is what makes this work. You may notice that your intuition feels sharper now. Not louder. Sharper. You're more aware of when to speak and when not to. When to check in and when to wait. That discernment isn't accidental. It's being strengthened through restraint. There's a quiet courage in not forcing resolution. in allowing things to unfold without needing to manage them. That courage is built in moments like this, where trust replaces control. This season may end without fanfare. No dramatic turning point. No clear acknowledgement. That doesn't mean it lacked purpose. Some of the most important seasons in life leave no visible markers. They leave internal change. You might one day realize that this was a moment where something didn't collapse because you stayed steady. Not because you said the right thing. Not because you acted quickly. But because you didn't leave. That matters more than you know. God doesn't choose people for moments like this based on how expressive they are. He chooses based on reliability. Based on character. Based on the ability to remain grounded when others feel unsteady. This moment is still sacred, even in its quietness. Especially in its quietness. Sacred things are often protected by stillness. You're not here to push clarity into existence. You're here to protect the space where clarity can arrive safely. Continue doing exactly what you're doing. Observing. Remaining. Regulating. Trusting. You don't need to see progress to know this matters. You don't need affirmation to know you're doing it right. And you don't need to rush the end of this season. Because when it shifts, and it will do so gently, without damage, because of how carefully this moment was held. That is not small work. That is faithful work. And it is exactly why you were chosen.
It ends quietly, not with a signal that tells you it's over, but with a feeling that tells you something is complete. You don't wake up and one day decide this moment has passed. You simply notice that weight you were holding no longer pressure the same way. Not because it disappeared, but because it no longer needs to held by you. There's a softness that settles into your chest. When this happens, a calm that doesn't feel earned through effort but given through alignment. You didn't rush, you didn't force, you didn't abandon. The moment when it stayed unclear longer than you expected, you stayed present, steady, and honest. And because of that, the ending arrives gently, without damage. You may notice that your role no longer feels active, not because it wasn't important, but because it did what it needed to do. Like standing watch through the night and realizing morning has come without announcement. You are not needed in the same way now, and that doesn't mean you failed. It means you succeed quietly. There's often emotion here, but not the overwhelming kind. It's a reflective, warm, almost grateful. Gratitude for having been trusted. Gratitude for not running. Gratitude for realizing that being there mattered. Even if no one ever explained how, the kind of gratitude stay with you. You might feel a sense of peace mixed with humility. Peace because nothing collapsed. Humility because you know you didn't fix anything. You simply stayed, and sometimes staying is the miracle. Sometimes presence is the protection. Sometimes consistency is the answer. What's beautiful about the ending is that it doesn't take anything from you. It gives something back, it gives you confidence in your character, trust is your timing, proof that you can handle serious movement without losing yourself. The lesson will follow you into every connection that comes true. This ending doesn't erase what happened, it honors it. It places it where it belongs, not as question, not as a burden, but as a part of your growth. You are different now, quieter in your strength, steadier in your presence, more trusting in your ability to show up when it matters. And as of you forward, you don't carry this moment with strain, you carry it with dignity, with the quiet knowing that when you were chosen to be steady, you were. When you were needed to stay, you did, and that was enough. This is what kind of ending that doesn't echo loudly, but it settles deep. The kind that doesn't demand attention, but leave you stronger. The kind that reminds you that sometimes God doesn't call you to act, but to remain, and you did. That's why this end with no loss, but with peace. No with noise, but with stillness. No with exhaustion, but with rest. And as you step that what come next, you do a slighter, clear and more grounded, knowing that when the moment asks for you, you answered with presence. This matters, and it always will. So thank you guys, this story ends here. If you like this story, like this video, comment to this story and subscribe to my channel.